Quiz time! Good NPC, bad NPC. Boblin the Goblin. Boo, the miniature giant space hamster. Bing Bong, the door-keeping imp in a bow tie. The correct answer, of course, is good NPC for all of them. These little guys are wonderful, and your D&D players will move heaven and earth to protect them. Let's try again. Good NPC, bad NPC. Strad von Zarovich. The Xanathar. Igwilv, aka Tasha. Ooh, that's much harder to say. They're nuanced, they're complex, they're multi-dimensional, and they're easy to get wrong in a way that our best boys maybe aren't. Getting your NPCs right is a challenge. You might find that your meticulously crafted nemesis gets beaten before getting to share their dastardly motives. You might find that your improvised off-the-cuff joke character becomes central to the story. What can we do to make NPCs for all occasions, from the silly to the subtle? And how can we take characters who may have started as a joke and give them some real depth? My name's Rich, and this is Renegade Rolls. However much fun it is to make NPCs for your games, if you're playing D&D or any similar TTRPG, it's super important to remember this. NPCs are not the stars of the show. The player characters are. NPCs exist as a supporting cast for the player's adventure. Even your big baddie shouldn't be hogging the limelight for too long. They can reflect and exaggerate PC traits, they can be the opposite entirely to create conflict. They can also be something in between, someone subtle who can develop with the PCs. What it boils down to is the NPCs are there to motivate your players to do stuff, and to allow their characters to grow and change as they interact with them. Whether they love them or hate them doesn't actually matter, but if my players don't react to them, then they're not going to serve their purpose in developing the player characters or pushing the story along. If that happens, drop them. Have them leave or rework them into something new. Minor and one-off characters can be one-dimensional, and that's amazing. I have an NPC in my intermittent Pac-Mandia D&D campaign called Montgomery Fandango. He speaks in a deliciously plummy voice, is brimming with confidence and verbose vernacular. He's larger than life in every way. As a town mayor, his role was just to welcome the party to the small town. That was everything I had prepped for him, just that, as he was only meant to appear in one scene in one session. I don't know if it was the voice or the name, but my players loved Montgomery Fandango, so I brought him back later in the session. Still as big and booming as before, but with a few more details. I had him come across as incredibly keen for the party to like him, and I let them roll insight checks to see what was up. It's amazing how letting players roll can make them super curious. In the end, everyone rolled pretty poorly, but I gave them just this little morsel. He seems completely genuine in his interest in you, but you realise he hasn't told you why. And soon after that, I ended the session. By the next time we played, I had him much more fully fleshed out. He was actually a failed merchant turned con artist who'd found an abandoned carriage by the roadside one day. In there, he found some fine clothes and a signet ring. Naturally, he put them on and walked into town as a man of obvious wealth and circumstance. Only now, the truth is catching up with him, and assassins have been sent against him, so he's looking desperately for anyone who can protect him. For any fans of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, Drawlight in the book and especially the TV series was my big inspiration for him. Now, other than the excellent name, I don't think Montgomery Fandango is a particularly creative character on my part, but he served a few really important purposes. In his initial incarnation, he was deliberately a caricature, full of bluster and bombast. His role then was to be a bit of fun and an interesting way for the party to discover this new location. When the players latched onto him, I suddenly had some interesting opportunities to give him some new functions. By having him confide his big secret in the PCs, he opened the door for my players to share more about their characters. That bit of vulnerability he showed gave permission for my players to bring more of their characters to life. Leading by example, either good or bad, is a great way to encourage your players to think about their own characters in some interesting ways. Have you ever had a character that started like this? The joke character that became integral to the plot? Please do share the joy and nonsense in the comments. Here are a couple of quick NPC creation tips that will save you a ton of hassle. Make an alphabetical NPC list, one name per letter of the alphabet. As a player, it's so confusing when characters have similar names. Looking at you, Lord of the Rings, with your Sauron, Saruman and Smeagol. If you're using long names, make sure to have nicknames or short versions for your characters to remember. His name, as I ought to have told you before, is really Asparagus, but that's such a fuss. To pronounce that, we usually call him just Gus. I recommend this because if you don't, your players will. Don't give them a chance to call Melchior Atrax Ganymede the Sorcerer. milky. As well as these improvised characters, we also need to be able to craft interesting enemies with a bit more to them from the beginning. Unless your big baddie is going to be Jormungand, the world-eating serpent of Norse mythology, you're probably going to need to give them a bit of personality. I find that creating monsters or irredeemably evil characters can be a lot of fun, but my favourite ones are those that have some nuance to them. Assuming you're playing a good campaign, how can we make this happen? If we're the goodies, then the baddies must be evil, right? First, an enemy is just someone who opposes the protagonist's goals. This could be the evil emperor, or it could be another party of heroes. I ran a session in the Demiverse where our party came across a rival group and really didn't like them. They were heroic heroes on the side of good, but just a bit too squeaky clean and arrogant. And of course, it all went sideways. It ended up being one of the most fun and bloodthirsty fights I've ever seen. The second point to remember is that everyone is the hero of their own story. People have an amazing ability to justify their actions even as they're doing the most unspeakable things. Out and out evil moustache twirling can be fun, and as GM you get to say things like, "Soon I will be all powerful." But antagonists with some pathos to them, with something in common with the player characters, are my absolute favourites. The commander who seeks to crush rebellion so that their country is strong enough to survive a greater external threat, whether real or imagined. The tyrant who lost their son but is determined that their daughter will live forever. Even the interplanar monstrosity who just wants to get home but is wrecking everything in this world on the way can provoke interesting reactions from the players. With these sorts of enemies, never be surprised if the characters decide to join them. In a game that my brother was DMing, my character Juliana Callisto, who was as good and heroic as can be, decided to join Strad von Zarovich and try and help him lift the curse on Barovia. We decided that meant she'd leave the party and I rolled up a new character, but it took the campaign and the eventual finale in a totally different direction. It's been a couple of years since then, and I think my brother's forgiven me for that one at last. For all these antagonists, I'd still recommend making them over the top in some way. It could be that their appearance and their outward personality seem very contained and reserved, but their actions should be attention grabbing. Earlier in my brother's Curse of Strahd campaign, he had Strahd pull out someone's heart right in front of the party. It was gory and it was shocking, but it fulfilled Strahd's function perfectly. It made us players react, sharing more about the characters, and encouraged us into action in a way that we wouldn't have done if Strahd had just sat there in Ravenloft for the entire campaign, waiting until we broke down his door. Your NPCs, be they major characters or mad little cameos, can make or break your campaign. You should be on the lookout for characters that your players love or love to hate, and then double down on them. Anyone who your players just feel meh about should stay as a minor character, or potentially get reworked, creating some more details about them. Adding more layers of complexity to characters can be super rewarding and lead to some fascinating people, but it can be very easy to go overboard with your creations, not just with your characters, but with any aspects of the world that you build. To help you avoid those pitfalls, I've got a video, just here, on how to start and more importantly, how to stop world building. I'll see you there or at a table near you, rolling an improbable succession of ones. Cheers.